If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome, Matrix members. As time creeps forward, it is common for us to feel trapped in our bodies. When I say that, it seems as if we become stiffer every year. Finding new ways to stretch out and move our bodies seems like the right thing to do. However, our guest Yogi Aran will show us a less common perspective about yoga and how stretching is killing us. Our guest Yogi Aran is one of the most sought-after teachers today. Yogi Aran is trailblazing a new path in the yoga world, known for his unorthodox perspectives on stretching and flexibility, and how both cause more harm than good. His teachings aim to help as many people as possible live pain-free lives to realize yoga's true intention. He is the creator of the revolutionary approach to yoga, applied yoga anatomy and muscle activation, Ayama, and the online platform, the Yogi Club, host of the yoga podcast, Stop Stretching, author of Autobiography of a Naked Yogi, and the forthcoming book, Stop Stretching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free, and is the co-owner of Blue Asa Yoga Retreat and Spa in Costa Rica, where he leads the Yogi Club yoga teacher training immersions year-round for students all across the globe. Yogi Aran's sense of humor, contagious laugh, and courageous adventurous spirit and healing journey of overcoming pain and discovering and living his true purpose makes him stand out and favored leading yoga teacher today. Follow our show and bookmark our podcast so you don't miss out on our fantastic Matrix mentors. Welcome to the Organic Matrix, Yogi Aran.
Thank you so much for having me here, Samantha. I really appreciate it.
It's an honor. What is your personal experience with chronic pain? And can you tell us about your journey of healing from chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. I started yoga when I was 18 years old. And I started yoga because I really wanted to become more limber. As I looked around at older people, quote unquote, I noticed that there was two kinds of older people. One type was kind of like people who were stiff and just didn't have a lot of mobility in their body. And then the other kind of people that sort of had this vitality and youthfulness. And what I perceived in that was this kind of range of motion. They were able to move. And so immediately I went to, flexibility. Incidentally, when I was doing Stop Stretching, the podcast, and I interviewed a lot of people, and I said, why do you think flexibility is important? And so many people kind of reflected back to me what was in my brain, but I just didn't put into words, was that so many people associate flexibility with youthfulness, with movement, with vitality, with health. You know, if you look at pictures on a lot of health magazines, it's people doing some sort of stretchy kind of pose. And so with like those people, when I was that age, when I was 18, I kind of put those dots together. And so the natural conclusion that I came to was yoga. And if you ask a lot of people, why they do yoga, it's always like, I'm doing yoga to stretch, and I do my weights to work out. I bicycle for cardio, and I do yoga to stretch. And so that was exactly why I started doing yoga. I was like, I've got to stretch, let's just do a class once a week or twice a week to become more limber. The interesting thing was when I was 18 years old, and this was the kind of like the moment that things started to shift in my body dramatically, was that I hurt my back badly. I threw my lower back out. And I mean, as an 18-year-old who's very active at that time, I remember it kind of being like, WTHF, like, like this is, I'm 18 years old. This should not be happening to me. Am I going to be destined for this kind of life? And so what I did was I started doing more yoga and to kind of like, deal with those kind of negative effects of the pain. And, the yoga would definitely make me feel better. But what started to happen was that I started having more problems as and I really got into yoga more and more and more throughout the years. By the time I was 29, I was dealing with a lot of chronic back problems, though. And I started dealing with knee problems. I remember I had to stop hiking because every time I started like going into the mountains within a couple of kilometers or miles, that my knees would start to develop this kind of searing pain. And then right around the age of like 35, my neck got so bad that I ended up having to go and see a physical therapist. His name is Eric Steibel. And it was kind of interesting. It was kind of like one of my light bulb moments. It wasn't the only one. It wasn't the big one, but it was one of many little ones where I went to go see him, and my pain was like 9 out of 10. And after he finished working on me, it dropped down to like a 1, 2 out of 10, which is really remarkable. And it stayed like that. Like a lot of times I would go and see a massage therapist and I would feel better, but the pain would always come back a couple of hours later. With Eric, the pain never really came back. I mean, it eventually did because I didn't do the exercises he told me to do. It was my fault. But I would go back and see him and he always did the same thing. So I knew it wasn't just a one-off. And eventually my back got so bad that I ended up in the hospital, and they wanted to do a steroid injection in my spine. But the orthopedic surgeon told me that I would probably need to have a spinal fusion. And I mean, I was like, at that time I was about 45, and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm a young, relatively speaking, a young man. I should not need this. And I'm a yoga teacher. I understand body biomechanics. I understand alignment. I'm doing all of this stuff. And I keep stretching to make it feel good, but I'm feeling worse. And so right after that happened, I went to go see Eric. And I actually spent 8 days with him, and he worked on me every single day. But one of the things that I came to understand with Eric is that I needed to work more on activating my muscles. And by stretching them, I was literally killing myself. And so that was how I got into all of this. I went on to study muscle activation. And then the big question was, how do I start to integrate this into the yoga world? Because I knew that being a yoga teacher, I had to flip my own script on flexibility. If you talk to any yoga teacher today, under their breath, they will tell you that yoga is stretching, basically. And even though a lot of yoga teachers say that yoga is not about how flexible you are, what are they teaching? Flexibility. So that's what I'm all about now, is flipping the script, and let's approach this from a different paradigm, because the old script isn't working, and we're, fulfilling the definition of insanity, repeating the same thing over and over, trying to get a different result, and it's not working.
I love that you're reinventing the perspective on yoga in the yoga world. And I say this like more westernized pop version of yoga, because I love yoga. I got into yoga when I was a wrestler in high school, because it used to help me with my injuries and the range
Sure.
of motion. And I would, when I was studying it, I never got to join like a yoga academy and really learn it. But what it helped me was, it helped me activate underdeveloped muscles in my adolescent body. And that's why it
Yeah.
helped me with wrestling, because it gave me more body awareness that I needed to prevent injury. Um, so the fundamental roots of yoga is about strengthening and strengthening skeletal muscle, right? In like India. But what you said is like a serious topic in the yoga world, where yoga was brought into this country, but because of pop culture, it's being viewed as these stretching and these exotic poses. And then someone who's just watching on Instagram may be inspired, try to fold their body into these positions, end up maybe really hurting themselves. They're not being marketed the fundamental roots of this practice. And I love yoga because it looks like just a physical exercise, but really it's a whole spiritual journey where you get to learn so much about yourself. Can you tell
Hmm.
us more about the spiritual perspectives on yoga as well?
Absolutely. I would also just kind of back up what you just said by just kind of reiterating too that asana postures is just a very small portion of sort of what traditional yoga is really about. And that the idea of asana in and of itself, the way that we understand asana today, postures, is a new concept in the yoga world. There really wasn't a lot of postures that were practiced. And this sort of whole anthem of yoga postures is only, 50 to 100 years old. So that's one topic. But going back to your question, that a lot of people ask, or a lot of people make these kind of grandiose statements about what yoga is about. And I do that all the time as well, so I'm as guilty. but at the end of the day, there's kind of two themes of yoga, which actually kind of, if you kind of pull out 40,000 feet and look at all spiritual traditions, you actually see that they're saying the same two things. The first thing about yoga, and I would even say, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, I think that we can say that they're all really saying the same message, that life is a precious gift and we shouldn't waste it on stupid things, petty things, that we're here to fulfill life's purpose. We're here to kind of stretch the boundaries of, our human mind and reach literally for the stars. Literally. I mean, one of my favorite speeches in history, there's a few, but one of my favorite speeches in history is by JFK. We're going to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And I think like that embodies so much of what yoga is telling us. Like, go for it, do big things, find out who you are and stretch the capacity of who you are. But there's a problem to that. And again, I believe that all spiritual traditions recognize this truth, that there's a problem with that, is that we get in our own way, that we are the manifestors, the architects and creators of our own self-created suffering. And so yoga really, and I'm a yogi, so I'm always going to be pro yoga more than any other spiritual practice. So no shade to anybody else. But I think that yoga, more than any other practice, really kind of directly head on addresses the causes of suffering, tells us exactly how we're messing up and what we need to do about it. And so that's why I love teaching yoga so much, is because of those. We can do those two things in dual action. It's not like you have to do one first and then do the other one. It's like we're constantly mindfully, yes, I'm reaching for the stars, and I'm, removing my suffering. I'm getting to work on myself constantly. We actually see that when people kind of focus on one in the yoga world, a lot of people just focus on trying to feel better without dealing with their stuff. And it creates a lot of problems. I'll just leave that one alone, but it just creates a lot of problems. And so we have to be mindful of both of them, and that recognize, yeah, I've got some work to do. Um, and I'm also pushing myself. And I think that's just such a beautiful idea that life is such a precious gift. And every moment that we spend doing, that we're in our stuff, it's just like, it's wasted time. We can celebrate our failures, we can celebrate our victimness, we can celebrate, but that's, who wants to do that? It's like every time we do that, we're just, it's a moment gone in our life. So like, that's the beginning. It's like yoga is now, and in Sutra 1, and don't waste it. That's it in a nutshell. If the whole idea of posture came out around more or less 1,000 years after the Yoga Sutras was written. And so right around, like, it was right 800 AD, more or less. That's when we started seeing like yoga postures being practiced. And it was really a way for people to access the potential energy, that potential universal energy that flows through everything in life. And we call it in yoga, we call it prana. So prana animates all of life. And within us is this limitless source of prana. And so by practicing posture, it was a way for us, for the lay person, for simpler people, to be able to access it, that we didn't need to go to a cave for all of our life, that, we could live a life in the real world, that we could have jobs, and we could do these postures to begin reorganizing that prana and direct that animated force into fulfilling life's purpose.
I love that. It reminds me of how when, like, in New Age philosophy, we consider like Buddha and like certain yogis, like thought leaders in the world, to be of like Christ consciousness. And so it reminds me of like bringing this beautiful wisdom to Gentiles, right? Welcoming it for us to be able to harness this vitality as well. And I love the way you describe it. It resonates with me and like my personal experience with yoga too. It's just so much to be aware of. There's so much to be grateful for, especially when we start looking within, start really like letting ourselves feel our bodies and where we're at.
Yeah. I actually believe that what you just said, you didn't say, I don't think you said the word gratitude, but what you just said made me think of gratitude. And, if we look at the teachings of Buddha and Jesus and a lot of the great saints, really what we're seeing is them instructing us to practice gratitude, like wholehearted gratitude, and to perpetually live in that, because people will flip between gratitude and entitlement like at the drop of a hat. And when we're really in gratitude, we're constantly in that practice. We don't flip back and forth. There is no moving back and forth. And I'm a firm and staunch believer through personal experience and working with my students that the solution to most of life's problems, and if not all, the big statement, I know, but most of life's problems is making sincere effort to be living in gratitude. I mean, could you imagine if our politicians got up on the debate stage and just talked about what they were grateful for? It would change the conversation completely.
I hope the right person hears this and takes that flip, because I think it would be the mature move in the direction our country needs. I would much rather vote for somebody who's transparent and says, hey, I could see where I align with my competition, and this is how I would take it if I were to have it in my own hands. It would be like Dale Carnegie would like celebrate in his grave.
Absolutely.
How did you come to create your yoga approach, applied yoga anatomy and muscle activation? And I love the name, it like rolls off the tongue, Ayama.
Ayama, yeah. Ayama, one of the questions I often get is Ayama actually a Sanskrit word? And the answer is yes and no. The word yama, we actually see it in the eight limb path. Yama means the restraints that we practice in life. And so anytime in Sanskrit you put a before a word, it's the opposite. So it's to live life without restraint, or to live without restraint. And another way of saying that is freedom, to live free. And I didn't plan that. Like, I did not intentionally, like, I want, what's a great acronym, and then make the title. I just made the title. And then one day I realized, like, oh yeah, that means a yama. And there's the word, yama. So it kind of, in Yogi Aran's world, it means like freedom, to live free. And so I was telling you the story that I went to go see Eric, and I spent 8 days with him. And one of the things that Eric was doing with me was sort of advanced muscle activation techniques on me. And one of the ways that they do that is they build your muscles up. They build that neuromuscular connection between the brain and the muscle. And then they do something to stress that connection. And then they rebuild it and stress it and rebuild it and stress it. And when I'm talking about stress, by the way, I'm not talking about anything like, invasive. It's just moving the body slowly at different access points. And again, it's very passive, it's very gentle, but it has a detrimental effect on that neuromuscular connection. It's a passive stress that shuts muscles down. And when I saw him doing this to me, and I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example, because if any of your listeners do yoga, they probably have experienced this in a yoga class, where they're lying in Shavasana. Shavasana is corpse pose, where you're lying on your back, and the teacher lovingly, not maliciously, lovingly comes up and grabs your ankles and just kind of sways your legs side to side, holding the feet. Well, that's actually one of the techniques to shut muscles down. And when Eric did that to me, I was like, oh my God, if this is as easy as it gets to shut muscles down, what about all of the other postures that we're doing and the things that are more, I'm going to say, passively aggressive? And I made a commitment right then and there that I was never going to adjust a student into a pose again. I was never going to do a hands-on manipulated correction. And number two, I would never teach stretching again. And because I just saw how quickly it was to shut muscles down. So that was the first step. And then the second thing that happened shortly after that was I felt like I really wanted to learn more in my own life. And so I started looking around at different courses, and I thought, why don't I check out muscle activation technique? At that time, a lot of their courses had moved online, and I talked to Eric. He said, you know what, Aaron, you're going to just eat this up. You're going to have a great time, and you're going to learn a lot, and it's really going to be easy for you because you're going to get it. So I went into it just like thinking, like, at worst, I'll learn something new. And at best, maybe I'll get some hacks and tips into my yoga world. And when I got into the course, I realized very quickly that everything I thought about yoga was wrong. And when I say yoga, I'm talking about right now the asanas, not the philosophy or the philosophical practices. I'm talking about just the way that we approach asana, the way that we approach posture. So that's just to be very clear on that point. And I just decided, I took Greg Roscoff's muscle activation technique, and to this day, I'm so thankful to him. He has invested his whole life into developing this technique. But the one missing connection, the one missing link was for yoga teachers. They're not yogis there. God bless them. They're not yoga people at all. And that's completely fine. They stay in their lane. But what I wanted to do was kind of see, how can I start to integrate this? And one of the ways that I did that was, like one of the most popular poses, for example, is triangle pose in the yoga world, Trikonasana, triangle pose. And so if your listeners don't understand triangle pose, Google it. It'll pop up right away. But if you don't have time to Google it, it's basically just a side bender. So if you're sitting and you think about like your left shoulder coming towards your left hip bone, and you're not, bringing your right shoulder forward, displacing your right shoulder forward. That's a pure side bending pose. And so I started to look at like all of the different ways that we move the spine, and I started to see like, oh, there's a correlation. So like with triangle pose, which is a side bender pose, it's a laterals. Those are called laterals. Sometimes we do poses in yoga that we call twists. We get twisted up, baby. And so we do a twist. And what is that? What is the action of that? Well, those are trunk rotators. Those are spinal rotators. Sometimes we do forward bends, like a seated forward fold. Those are trunk flexors, and then we do back bends in yoga, which are called, biomechanically trunk back extensors, trunk extensors. So the kind of like switch for me was like, instead of like when we come into triangle pose, which is a lateral, instead of like trying to open up the side body, which is what a lot of teachers teach, let's say like feel the side body stretching. I approach it now from more like, let's get the body that we're moving into, the side of the body that we're moving into, let's get that activated. Let's get that stronger. Instead, because it's the muscles. Muscles do two things. They move bones and they stabilize joints. So if we're just focusing on stretching the side body, we're going to start passively reaching for the floor in that pose. I don't want you to reach for the floor. I want you to really engage the side of the body that we're moving into. And if that's engaged, guess what? Now you have stability. One of the number one things all my students say to me is like, Aran, I'm feeling more stable as I'm doing these poses. I don't feel like, they might use words like, I don't feel wobbly. I feel like I can just stay here and breathe and I'm not hurting myself. But that's because muscles are now working. Another kind of like way to think about it, and this is one of my favorite analogies, is we have this, I use this kind of like archetypal name for that's stiff Biff. So stiff Biff is like, the archetypal person who is really, and women can fall into this category very easily too, by the way. So I use the male version because usually when we think about stiff Biff, he's like this guy that works out a lot. He's got big muscles. And when he bends forward, he can't get his hands past his knees. Well, from our perspective, from most people's perspectives, Biff can't touch his knees or can't get past his knees because he's got tight hamstrings. But from an Ayama perspective, we're not concerned about the hamstrings. In fact, if we just focus on stretching the hamstrings, number one, that's not going to improve his range of motion. It might improve it for, 5 minutes, half an hour at most, but then his body is going to revert back to that tightened state very quickly. Why? Because we haven't actually addressed what is causing the tight muscles in the body. And this is something that I have to be honest with you, Samantha. Like I don't understand why fitness trainers, why people in the physiotherapy world, and especially yoga teachers, why we never ask the question, what is causing the tight muscles in the first place? So from an Ayama perspective and an MAT perspective, the reason why we have tight muscles is it's a protective mechanism in the body. The body feels tight. The body feels unstable. So it's going to tighten up. So if you kind of like think about the first days of fall or winter and, you step outside and you can feel that briskness in the air and then you almost kind of slip a little bit. And because there's ice on the ground for the first time and you weren't expecting it, right? So what does your body do in that moment? It tightens up. When the body's afraid, when the body is scared, when the body senses danger, when the body feels unstable, it tightens up so that the hamstrings in stiff Biff are tight because the body doesn't feel stable, which is kind of ironic because stiff Biff, works out. He's, taking care of himself probably in the gym all the time. But the problem is that his brain is not connected to the muscles. And what muscles are they not connected to? Well, the hamstrings are the opposite muscles to the quads. So his quads are not engaging properly. And because the body doesn't sense stability with the quads engaging properly, it's going to tell all the muscles in there to contract, 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 contract. And that contraction then becomes a tightened state of muscles. So if we really want to get the muscles, looser, if we want to use that term, or more flexible, we need to start addressing the opposite muscles. And so from our perspective, we're working on, when we fold forward, let's not worry about the hamstrings. I don't care about the hamstrings. I don't care about the lower back. I want to see the quads engage properly. And of course, then we're starting to look at engaging the abdominals correctly.
I love your approach. And this is it right next to medicine. Recently, I had the privilege to interviewing a lot of doctors in the medical field. And I mention this because it aligns with exactly what you said. Like, we have to ask the right questions. And the question is, what's the source of the problem, not to just treat the symptoms. And it inspires me so much that you're bringing awareness to this topic, because I think this is where our consciousness is making a paradigm shift. Because if I'm blessed enough to be aligned with people like you who are waking us up out of our old model. We even think about how children were raised in the past, with the baby boomer like the parents that are the baby boomers. A lot of our childhood raising was, if the kid cries, we discipline the kid. Like, don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about. That was the old culture.
Yes.
and that was like just like how medicine was back then as well. It was like treating the symptom. If you're tired, here's some caffeine. And now we're starting to become aware of the impact this is having. And so thank you so much for helping us get grounded and bringing up all these fantastic ideas that we can all apply into our lives professionally and personally.
Yeah. Can I just share a quick story with you? So I had this one woman come to my teacher training. I think she was 57 years old. Her name is Mary. And she's on my podcast. You can actually hear her. And one of the reasons why she said she did yoga was, and when we interviewed her, I had all the interviews and I was listening to them one day before I was teaching my class. And she was there, of course. And, but I heard her say in the interview and the recording, like, she did yoga because she wanted to touch her toes. And so when I got to the class, I immediately got her on my table and I got all the students around and I said, so Mary, you want to touch your toes, eh? She said, yeah. So I got her to reach forward, not like to grab her toes, but just to see how far she was from her toes. So she was about 6, 7, 8 inches away from her toes, which already was a huge step up from where she was before she came to my training. So I did 2 muscle activation techniques with her. And when I was finished, she actually got 6 inches past her toes. And it was like, seeing is believing. And all the students, literally their jaws dropped to the floor. But what did I do? I activated her quads and I proved their ability to contract properly. I activated her core muscles, primarily her rectus abdominis, like this, what we sometimes call the 6-pack or the 8-pack. And that's all I really did. And by doing that, I was able to get that much range of motion. We went from about 6, 8 inches before the toes to about 6 inches past the toes. It's 12 inches of range of motion. But here's the other thing. It's like, if you take a strap and just grab your feet and pull yourself forward, you're actually going to cause more problems in the long run, because now you're bypassing the body's own proprioception of where it is in space, right? So after you come out of that pose, your body doesn't know anything. It doesn't know where the hamstrings are. It doesn't know where your quads are. It doesn't know where your lower back muscles are. It doesn't know where your abdominal muscles are. And, one of the things you mentioned earlier was that you're, younger and you're a wrestler. Well, if you're a wrestler and you're going out on the mat with these muscles not working properly, That's a problem. But with Mary in this instance, not only does she have more range of motion, but now the body knows where all these muscles are in space. And that is so cool because we haven't destabilized anything. And then if anything, we've created more integrity with that neuromuscular response in the body. So anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because I just think it's just like amazing to see how much more range of motion we can get just by getting muscles to work properly.
I love that. So I based off like my personal relationship with yoga, I think that you're actually bringing it back to the roots in the sense that it's about body activation and learning how to move with gravity. And
Mm-hmm.
I love it because it it's like we want to move with our bodies, like you said. If it's very easy for, and that's where discipline really shines through the practice, is like you can force yourself into a pose. You can meet your body where you're at, activate
Yeah,
your muscles, take your time, and use it to like be mindful to the state of your condition. And that's where the spiritual practice of yoga becomes so personal and
yeah,
beautiful. I love this.
absolutely.
Um, how does Ayama help? Well, we answered some of these questions. I'm gonna edit this too, so I just wanna get
Sure,
grounded.
no problem.
So because of you changing the game from pop culture and yoga, you must have made some people angry, telling yogis to stop stretching. Telling yogis to stop stretching seems a bit controversial. What kind of feedback have you gotten in the community?
A lot of pushback. There is one time I put a post in this. I'm on this yoga group, and I posted this article that I had written about why stretching is hurting us. And this person immediately popped up and said, what is this malarkey? And I find that a lot. It's like I become, in some circles, I become like the crazy cat lady, where people are like just, kind of mentally, not physically, mentally patting me on the head going, "Oh, that's nice. You're so cute." And one of my friends who's actually just with me right now, he's brought a yoga group to Blue Osa, but he was telling me that he's trying to get his teachers to stop teaching child's pose. Child's pose is like one of the number one yoga poses that is offered in the yoga world, but biomechanically and from a neuromuscular standpoint, it is the worst pose to do. If you want to mess your body up, practice child's pose, because you will be guaranteed to mess your body up. Because if you think about what child's pose is doing, you're overstretching the glutes, you're overstretching the lower back muscles, you're over shortening the trunk flexors, the abdominal muscles, you're over shortening all of the hip flexor muscles. So you're actually creating more instability by teaching child's pose. And my friend knows this to be true because I've actually proved to him what happens. Like, because my line of work, one of the things that I can do is I can test muscle function. We test muscles' ability to contract and contract on demand. When we're talking about stability from a muscular perspective, we're talking about the ability to contract and contract on demand. And so I did this with my friend one time. I was showing him like, hey, your muscle's strong. Do you agree it's strong? We tested, it's strong. He can feel it's strong because he felt like what it was like when it was weak, and he felt like what it was like when it was strong. And so then I had him go into child's pose for like 20 seconds. And then we came back and we retested those muscles. Every single muscle in that whole axis tested weak. All the trunk extensors, all the lower back muscles, all the abdominal muscles, all the hip muscles, both front and back, every muscle tested weak. And so he's tried to get some of his teachers to stop doing child's pose, and he hasn't been really pushy about it, but none of them are listening to him. And it just, there's this whole kind of idea in the world, like, it's like I said, the blind leads the blind. And we just kind of like clomb onto an idea and we believe it's true because We need to re-certify who we are in the world. And that edification of self comes from our attitudes, judgments, and beliefs about the world, our paradigms. So when our paradigms are challenged, we feel threatened. And so it's been this kind of really hard thing, Samantha, to balance, like, how can I have respectful conversations, but also come back to truth? And so I've been kind of balancing those things, like not disrespecting a person and where they're at necessarily, but also just trying to gently like show them like, hey, this is hurting you and there is a solution and this is the solution. We don't have to teach stretching in yoga. A lot of yoga teachers feel very threatened, extremely threatened. One of my best friends is a yoga teacher, and she was helping me with the course recently. And she did something in her class one day which hurt people. And it was really like hard for her to hear that. And to this day, I think she's angry at me for telling her that she hurt people. She is angry. And she felt very disrespected, very, she pulled out all of this kind of like, this stuff that we hear, like, I don't feel seen and blah, blah, blah. And that wasn't my intention. My intention is to create safety, and it's her intention as well. But we have very different definitions of that. My definition of safety is don't teach stretching. And she did teach stretching, and she hurt like 3 individuals specifically in that class. And by teaching stretching, and it's just hard for people to hear. One of the things that she said to me was, "But Aran, we're teaching yoga," and I said, "Yeah, we don't have to teach stretching to teach yoga." And she turned back and she says, "But that's what yoga is about." And I almost like fell over, because she's the kind of person that's like really into the whole philosophical side of yoga, probably more so. But to hear her say that was just, it was like a light bulb moment to teach me, to show me how hard it is to break through this wall. So I'm not trying to necessarily reach yoga teachers as much as I'm just trying to reach people that know, that either intuitively have felt like the stretching business is wrong, or have either been injured a lot, or are kind of people that really innately want to learn how to be stronger, more stable in life, so that they can go out and manifest and live their life purpose.
So I feel so called to mentioning the concept of a stone Buddha. Do you know about that?
I haven't heard this analogy or story before, so.
Oh, fabulous. You remind me of it. You're a true pioneer, and I really respect your courage and the position that you're taking. And so there's a saying in Buddhism that one time a disciple came to Buddha and said, "How do I become a Buddha? I've been meditating, I've been doing yoga, I've been chanting, and I just don't feel enlightened." And Buddha's like, "Well, you'll never become a Buddha trying to become a Buddha, because then you'll only be a stone Buddha, a Buddha that walks and talks like a Buddha, but doesn't feel and have the essence of nirvana." So the idea was that you will never be where you want to be in life trying to become it. So like that fake it till you make it can only get you so far. You have to live it. And you have to learn how to step out of the ego and connect it to applying it to real life.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your friend, you've given her a gift, truly, because you're helping her in a human, earthly sense. You're helping her avoid getting problems in her practice with like clashbacks, bad reviews, and lawsuits. And then on the other hand, you're helping her in her spiritual journey by giving her an opportunity to approach something different and to be flexible in mind, which is a very big principle in yoga, is mental flexibility and adaptability. And I hope that she can come to feel your gesture as endearing as it's intended to be, because it's scary to let go of our attachments, but that's exactly what we're trying to do on this path of freedom, to let go of what holds us back. So I wish her well, and I hope that she can see the gesture for what it was meant to be. And I appreciate you sharing the story.
Yeah, I also have a lot of compassion for yoga teachers currently, because it took me a while to take that leap. And here's the thing, like, human beings, I think sometimes we feel like we have to have something that defines us. And once we have that something, we become, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, so please don't take it like that. We become lazy and we stop trying. We stop trying to be better. We stop, because we're already better. We're already enlightened. So why do I need to become more enlightened? And again, I'm not being disparaging. I'm just talking about the human condition. And we always have to push ourselves to discover truth. For myself, when there was a light bulb moment. I had a few, remember I said I had a few, but one of them was in 2015. And I was like, I should not be teaching stretching anymore. And I really struggled, Samantha, because I thought, if I don't teach stretching, how am I going to teach yoga? And so here's the thing. The good news is I figured it out. I figured it out. And so hopefully yoga teachers can acknowledge that and see that and run with it and take what I've done. And because what I've done and the way that I present and the way that I did, it's not a big leap. It's a very small leap, but you do need to invest a couple of hours of your time to kind of make that own switch in your own brain. And that's like with my friend I was just talking about, one of the things that she said to me, which really kind of drove home this point, is like, Aran, I've taken this course with this person and this course with this person. I traveled all over the country for X amount of years with this person who was my anatomy teacher. I did this in the physiotherapy club of blah, blah, blah. And so there's all of this kind of like, again, this isn't a disparaging remark per se, but it's all of this kind of self-righteousness. Like, I've done all of this stuff. And so, and what she said was very fascinating. I don't have time or the bandwidth or the space to learn a new approach. And so what you're kind of saying is, I would rather teach what I know is hurting people rather than learn, something new that can actually empower people. I thought that was really poignant. And it wasn't so much a commentary on her as I think as a commentary on where we're at. And that's the glass ceiling that I'm trying to break through.
And thank you for that, because this is the ceiling that is that dome that's really like blocking us from reaching our true human potential. Because that I'm so with you on the human condition type of perspective, because we're just trying to help. We're not trying to shame anyone. No, that is not the intention. The intention is, like you said, set ourselves free and like help give, because this whole idea of the podcast too is like, I want to bring awareness to these topics that aren't very talked about so that we can have more freedom and choice. Because how can we have true freedom to make a choice if we don't know what's behind our options? And so what you're revealing to a lot of people, and I'm sure that they hear the words that they're speaking, and I'm sure that when they're in moments of meditation, they'll see that it's their ego that's rejecting. Because if they've gone through all those studies, the next question is, are you open for further development, or are you capped? Just bring it back to their power and be like, look, wake up. I'm not going to tell you wake up, because that's not going to work. There's more resistance there, but that's where like the ball's in your court. Are you a master? Are you done learning?
Yeah. Well, and also I see that people even do my teacher trainings. I mean, by the time they leave my teacher trainings, they have full knowledge of what stretching is doing. And they know that, and they know the solution, and they got it, but then they go back out into the world, and then doubt starts to creep in, and you can start to see they start teaching child's pose again, and because everybody else is doing it. And it takes a lot of, which is something that I'm completely about and that I teach people how to do, but it takes a lot of courage to become independent and to rely on your own knowledge source. We as humans very quickly glom or attach ourselves to, popular ideas, popular beliefs. They're doing it, so maybe I should do it like that too. They're voting that way, so maybe I should vote like that too, so I can stay part of the club. And you and I, we're doing work where we're hopefully breaking through that a little bit and showing people, not empowering people, but giving people the tools so they can empower themselves to take those steps. And that's for me what it's really all about.
Yes, we're passing the torch, and I know the one person that gets inspired is the one that can change the whole paradigm shift. So
yes,
may God be with us on this journey.
yes, thank you. Yes.
So, what is the healthiest way to stretch for those who are interested in loosening up their bodies?
So the healthiest way to stretch is don't stretch. One of my taglines is stop stretching and start activating.
Yeah.
And so right off the bat, I would encourage people to look at look at my YouTube channel, and I've got a ton of stuff on there already. We release about 8 classes, videos a month. So it's, there's a lot of opportunity for people to really kind of like take that. And I would really encourage, people to do that. The key, there's a few things, but one of them is like start activating, start looking at ways to dynamically do poses. So one example of this is just one example. So one of the terms out there you hear sometimes is dynamic stretching versus passive stretching. Stop passive stretching. So passive stretching is like if you were Mary and you wanted to touch your toes, you can't reach your toes. So you take a yoga strap or some sort of strap, you put it around your feet and you pull yourself forward, right? So that's passive stretching. Dynamic stretching, and I hate calling it dynamic stretching because it's not really stretching. Seriously, it's not stretching. But what you would do then is take your hands behind your back and just start to fold forward and maybe just kind of reach forward and hold it for, 10 seconds, come back up, pause, and then come back forward again and hold it. So that's an aspect of dynamic stretching. Another example of it, which is one of my favorites actually, is if you're lying on the floor and you want to stretch your hamstring, what you would normally do if you're lying on the floor is bring one leg so that it's 90 degrees. So the leg is at 90 degrees of your torso. Again, you might either grab the leg and pull the leg towards you, or you would take a yoga strap to the foot and pull yourself, to your leg, or pull the leg to your torso. Eliminate the strap and eliminate your hands. Just bring the leg up as high as you can and pause there for X amount of seconds, and then lower the leg back down. Bring the leg back up and repeat that. Do that several times, maybe 6, 7, 8 times. And you will notice that you will start to not only develop a healthier range of motion, that you will also have stability in that joint because you're no longer bypassing the neuromuscular connection, the brain to the muscle, and you've got integrity in your body at that point.
What you're saying makes so much sense, and I think our listeners will be able to connect the dots because of our past interviews. We always talk about how the mind, body, everything's interconnected, and not forcing makes so much sense when you explain it, and you do a great job like giving us a clear image for a podcast of the body. I just have to compliment you on that because it can't be so easy to talk about the physical body on a podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So what do you see for the future of yoga?
What do I see for the future? One of the things about yoga, which is fascinating to me, is that it's a living science. And whether you want to say it's living science on how to feel better in your body, or a living science in how to evolve spiritually. It's a science. And so we take the ancient teachings, and as we progress, in science, we can start to advance our own health, advance our own understanding. And I think that we're going to start to see a shift, and we're already seeing a shift. My teacher about 6 or 7 years ago made a comment and said that a lot of people in today's world that are doing yoga, they came in through like Bikram yoga, which is hot yoga. They came in through this sort of power yoga mentality. Some teachers are, they come in through a teacher playing AC/DC in their yoga classes, which is, and I don't want to judge people. I don't want to judge people for how they come to yoga, because I think that all of us come to yoga with the practice, with a certain intention. I want to stretch. Namaste. If that's your intention, that's why I came to yoga. I started off this conversation saying that. But what happens is there's a light that starts to go off. And at that moment, you realize there's more to this. There's got to be more to this than AC/DC, right? And so when that light happens, that's where the real potential starts. And the student goes, okay, who else is teaching in a way that is more conducive for me to reach that state, whether it's physiological. What I'm trying to do is bridge more. I'm trying to more bridge the physical and the spiritual, and they are intertwined. And the reason why that they're intertwined is because if I'm in pain in my body, I can't do anything in life. I remember in one teacher training, I had this young girl come, 22, and she threw her back out. I think it was her QL, it just became inflamed. Her whole lower back became inflamed. And this happened on day 2 of yoga teacher training. And I was like, she was down for the count. She could barely get out of bed, 22 years old. And by the way, that was another light bulb moment for me, because I was like, I need to have the tools to fix people. And I wish I knew then what I know now, because I could have fixed her. But but that's just testament to everybody who, when we hurt ourselves, we can't live life's purpose. Part of my purpose in life is to be outdoors, to hike in the mountains, to, literally, physiologically be a trailblazer. I love hiking. But if my body's in pain, if my back's out, my knees are hurting, I can't do that. And I can't live in my purpose. So I feel like it goes back to, we need to feel better in our body to free up that energy. When we're in pain, there's a part, no matter how much pain there is, physiological, mental, part of our brain, part of our mental energy, part of our life force energy is constantly going to that pain. So part of my mission is to get people pain free so they can feel that energy to live their life purpose.
God bless you, because it was a big part of my journey. And I see this as a divine synchronicity, because when 2 years ago, I was in the worst health of my life. I was only 23 years old, and I had problems with my lymph nodes. I found an elixir from a company called Live Ultimate that is 25 superfoods. It cleansed me. I started healing, and it made me realize, I said, if I start getting more energy, I'm going to put that newfound energy in what's serving me and my higher purpose, because I realized that my physical pain was preventing me from enjoying my company with my family. It was making me cranky during the holidays because of the weather. And I did not feel like I could have, if I had children, I wouldn't understand how I would be able to take care of them. And I was so young. So I was like, something needs to change. And I love that you're here helping people that were in a position that I were in. And it's even better because you're a human, not just a supplement. So you have so much more wisdom to offer.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I have 2 challenges for our Matrix members today in honor of our talk with Yogi Aran here. I challenge you guys to write something you're grateful for in your life today, in any dynamic aspect, and tag us on social media. We would love to hear it. And I challenge you to do 30 days of Yogi Aran's YouTube channel yoga trainings. That's what I'm gonna plan on doing. And let's learn from Yogi Aran.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Samantha. Can I just offer one other thing too? That on October 21st, we're having my book launch, and so my book will be available on Amazon, which is called "Stop Stretching: A New Yogic Approach to Mastering Your Body and Live Pain Free." And I go through like all of these really simple and easy hacks on how to start activating your body. And that will really teach you how to start substituting stretching in your life. And there's also 4 yoga routines at the back of the book that you can easily start to implement into your life. And they're life-changing. So I just want to put that out there, especially for yoga people, because part of my mission is to start teaching yoga teachers muscle function, which is something that we teach in the book, how do muscles work and how to get them working more efficiently.
I love it. I can't wait to personally read your book. And when I do, I would love to interview you about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
To support Yogi Aran and his mission to help people heal from chronic pain, get your copy of Stop Stretching, a new yogic approach to master your body and live pain-free. Follow him on social media and check out his YouTube channel, Yogi Aran. Aran's social media links and YouTube channel will be provided in the links below. Chronic pain can be crippling. Please tag us if Aran's wisdom supports you on your journey. If you found value in our content, please tag us on social media with your insights. All feedback is welcomed and helps observe our fellow Matrix members. To stay up to date with our Matrix mentors and what we have in store for you, bookmark our website and subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel. It was great to have you with us on the Organic Matrix, and we'll love to see you on the following download. Thank you, Yogi Aran.
Thank you so much, Samantha. Appreciate it.